But failure. Failure is part of all of our lives, yes? We've all experienced it. Maybe you are experiencing it right now. Maybe you are experiencing the consequences of a failure. Maybe you are remembering a failure of something where in everything that you do, it comes back to mind. And there is always the temptation to make decisions based on that failure. Now, sometimes to remember a failure is okay, it can be educational, but there is also the element of responding to a failure in a way that keeps you from something that's going to bring you life. We've been talking for the last couple weeks about how Hernando Cortez in 1519 sailed from Cuba to the Yucatan Peninsula in eastern Mexico. And when he gets there, on the way there, he starts to hear his crew grumbling and complaining about how long the trip is, about how tough life is going to be when they get there. And then when they get there, the time comes for them to go in and fulfill their mission. And Cortez calls everybody together, and rather than giving them a pep talk, he tells his commanding officers to burn all the ships. Burn them completely into the water. Leave nothing that is going to allow them to climb back onto those ships to return to what they consider safety, to return to what they consider success, to return to what is familiar and what they think that they can control. Cortez says, no. Burn the ships because there's life ahead. And what is our life is not what we left. It's not what's behind us, it's what's in front of us. And so we're going to burn these ships to get rid of any possibility that we can climb back on and escape back to home. Escape back to what we call success. So they burn the ships. Imagine being one of those men standing on that beach watching your only escape burn into the water. Some of you have experienced that in your life, where you have looked at the things that you thought you could depend on, the things that you thought were secure, the things that you thought would keep you where you wanted to be, go up in smoke. And it's scary. And we talked about a guy named Joshua, who was an assistant to Moses. Now, Moses, you've heard of. Moses was the guy who held up his stick and the Red Sea parted, and 1 million Hebrews walked through the Red Sea, escaped Egypt. It was Moses who called into action God, who brought the plagues on Pharaoh and all of Egypt, which caused Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go. Moses, you've heard of. Joshua, up to this point, nobody really cared. Joshua was Moses' assistant, his aide. He wasn't some big military commander. He wasn't looked to for all the big decisions. Joshua was just kind of like, hey, there's Moses, and the guy standing next to Moses. But because of Moses' failures, God taps Joshua, says, you're it. Moses, what God says, God says. Moses goes out and he announces to all the people, Joshua is going to lead you into the promised land. Moses heads up onto Mount Nebo and dies and doesn't return. Joshua is now left in charge, and 1 million people. Okay, this is not this room, okay? This room of 70 people looking at you. I mean, this would be enough pressure, right? If all 70 people in this room went, Corbin. This is 1 million people now looking at Joshua going, what's next? So Joshua calls in all the leaders of the army. Joshua calls in all the important people that were leading the tribes of people. And he tells them, all right, so we're going to go into the promised land. The promised land is across the Jordan River. So we're going to have to cross the Jordan River. And Joshua is like kind of testing it to see, are they going to follow me? Are they actually going to do? And all those insecurities that we talked about last week of ways that Joshua hadn't got it right with Moses before, and Moses had shut him down and been like, nah, you got it wrong. That's not what, all those insecurities. So he presents this to the leaders around him to see, are they going to actually listen to what I have to say? And when Joshua said, we're going to cross the Jordan, and we're going to take Jericho, the leaders around him who had much more experience, who were far more wise in the eyes of the world, they looked at Joshua and they said, we'll follow you anywhere. Just as we followed Moses, we will follow you. And then they said this, and anybody who doesn't follow you, we'll kill him. That's some loyalty right there, right? So they say to Joshua, we're with you. You lead, and wherever you go, we'll go. The children of Israel are just on the other side of the Jordan River. On the other side of the Jordan is Jericho. And the city council of Jericho meets. And they are terrified. Because they can look out and they can look at you. They could see across the Jordan. It's not that big a river. They could see across the Jordan and they could see 1 million people making camp right there. They've heard of these people. The people of Jericho had heard about the children of Israel and how God is completely on their side. How God has allowed them to survive this journey that we're going to talk a little bit more about later, through the wilderness, through the desert, and now they're camped right across the Jordan River. So the city council convenes and they're like, what should we do? Somebody raises their hand and goes, hey, I have an idea. We need to train our army some more. We need to get all the soldiers together. We got to have them do push-ups and some jumping jacks. We got to have all our blacksmiths make more swords, make more shields. We got to get ready for battle because they're coming and we're going to have to fight them. And there's kind of this murmur amongst the council where they're like, okay, ordinarily that would kind of be the game plan. There's 1 million people across the Jordan. And these people have God on their side. There's no way we're going to be able to fight them. So what should we do? And one of the guys on the council stands up and he said, the city, we need to lock it down. See, the thing that Jericho had going for it was its walls. You lock down Jericho, nobody's getting in. So they pass a law that each night at sundown, the gates of the city would close and be locked and barricaded. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out. You're not back in the city by sundown, you're on your own. And so that's what they did. The sun set that evening, and they closed up the gates. They reinforced it with these huge bars that fell across both gates. There was no way anything was going to get through. And the sun set that night. Meanwhile, across the Jordan, Joshua meets with a couple secret agents. These guys had proven themselves to be able to handle difficult situations. These guys were trained and knowledgeable on how to move about different places without drawing attention to themselves. I don't know about you, but I'm not super stealthy. people typically know when I'm around. But these guys, they'd be able to blend in. They'd be able to maneuver into the city. And so what Joshua told them to do is, you got to get in there. We got to know what we're up against. So I want you to say, don't tell anybody that I've given you this mission. This is just between us. I want you to get in there tomorrow morning. I want you to take a look around and see what we're up against and report back to me. And remember, this is between you and me. Now, reconnaissance isn't a new thing. It's not something that, well, we do it now. They did it back then, and it wasn't uncommon. What was uncommon was the way that Joshua did it. He didn't announce it to everybody and go, hey, so I'm going to send Pete and Dan into the city, and they're going to scope it out for us. He did it secretly because he was like, you know what? If we're going to fail at this, I'm not going across the Jordan. If these guys come back and they say we shouldn't do this, I want to be able to say, hey, I've made a decision. So he did it in secret because he was scared of failing and what that would do. So the next morning, the two spies head into Jericho. The gates open in the morning, and there were communities around Jericho. And so a lot of people from the surrounding communities would walk in to the gates to go to work. And so these two spies, they just slip in like anybody else and walk through the city. And all through the city, no matter where they went, they heard, are they still there? Are they still across the river? Have they moved? Do you see them getting swords and spears and catapults ready? Do they see, are you hearing war chants? But everywhere they went, people were talking about the million Israelites on the other side of the Jordan. And they're terrified. The two spies head to a house of a woman named Rahab. Now, Rahab was a prostitute. So this was the perfect place for them to hang out because people were coming and going from that place all the time. So they'd never get noticed. And they head in to Rahab's house, and she knows. In fact, she says, your God is the God above all other gods. Your God is the almighty, all-powerful God. And she hides him out. Some of the city councilmen saw the two spies head to Rahab's house, and they reported back to the king. Say, hey, those two guys, that we don't know who they are, but they're heading, we've never seen them before. They're in Rahab's house. We got to check it out. So they send some soldiers to Rahab's house. They knock on the door. Rahab answers, and they go, where are the two men that showed up here a little while ago? She said, they left. Didn't stay long. I saw them head toward the gate. I think they were planning on getting out before sundown. If you hurry, you can probably catch them. Here's the thing. They hadn't left. They were still, so she told, a lie, right? And it totally worked. The soldiers left. She goes up onto the roof where she's hidden the two spies. She says, you're safe. Now, real quick, kind of a side note, this idea of you can read this and all right, is this mean that it's okay to lie? Here it is. Right here in the Bible, it says that she lied and it was for God. And what this is called a conflict of virtues. God is about life. And if someone is acting against God, you are under no obligation to go, oh, well, I have to tell the truth because telling the truth is more important than a person's life. We saw this in World War II, where people hid Jews and lied to authority about where the Jews were and that they were hiding them, because the life that was being preserved is more important than upholding a moral code with those who are looking to break God's law. Does that make sense? So there is this conflict of verses like, it's not permission to lie. God says don't lie. But when someone is acting against God's will, then you are not under obligation to tell the truth for the sake of telling the truth. It would be the same in your life if someone were hurting you or violating you, abusing you, that you are not under the obligation to, not tell anybody because they told you not to say something. You absolutely say something. Because God is for your life. And if someone is acting against you, that is against God, against who God is and against what God has for you, you are not under the obligation to uphold truth towards somebody who is acting against God. And that's really important for you guys to understand. It's really important that, because a lot of people live in that fear, and so they don't say anything. But this woman, she knows that these men are of God. And so she tells the soldiers, they left. They're headed out. You might be able to catch them. You might be able to catch up with them right outside the walls, because I think that they were headed that way. Now, the children of Israel had experienced 40 years of failure. See where it says Egypt? See where it says Jericho? On foot, that's an 8-day journey. They had been wandering around for 40 years. 40 years for an 8-day journey. That's a whole lot of failure, right? That is a whole lot of, God, what's going on? That's a whole lot of bad decisions. That's a whole lot of trying to live on your own instead of depending on God. It's a whole lot of giving into this fear that Joshua was tempted by, tempted to give into, and was giving into when he calls the spies and goes, hey, I need you to go check this out just in case we might fail. Just in case this is too much for us to handle. You guys, in your life, we all face stuff that's too much for us to handle. And that ship of failure comes calling. A lot like the ship of failure was calling out to Joshua as he remembered this. As he remembered 40 years of wandering around. And he goes, I want to avoid that. I don't want that to keep going. So I'm going to just climb back on my ship. I'm just going to remember all that failure. And I'm going to allow those failures to dictate my life. I'm going to allow those failures to make my future decisions. Each of us in our life, in some way, we've allowed past failures to dictate future decisions. Now, sometimes there's wisdom in that. Sometimes there are things that we learn from our failures that we needed to learn. Sometimes the failures come from ways that we have lived against God. We should learn from those failures. We should be aware of those failures and not just be like, no, I can do it. No, I can do it. And we kill ourselves trying to make something that we want to work. But when God's leading us, when we're keeping our eyes on Jesus, and he's leading us as he was leading Joshua. He had told Joshua, I will be with you. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear, for I am with you. Be strong and courageous. Even though God said all of those things to him, Joshua was still like, okay, I need you to go check out this city because, man, it could be bad. And he's wanting to climb back onto this ship of failure because he believes that climbing on the ship of failure, staying where he's at, avoiding failure, he believes is success. In your life, as you avoid failure, as God is leading you in your life, in what ways are you believing that avoiding failure is success? Because the truth of what God shows us in his word, what he reminds us of over and over as he says that he is with us, is that the fear of failure will keep you from the place that you're supposed to be. That as you look at the failures in your life and you go, well, I can't fix it. I can't do better. I can't. All right, maybe in your own power, you can't. You might be totally right. Where you're like, yeah, you're a mess. You did that and it was a disaster. It completely fell apart. I know when I look at my life, the times that, man, things have just gone completely sideways have been times I've been so dependent on myself. And I think about things in my life where the fear of failure made me run from the place that I was supposed to be. In your life, how has the fear of failure caused you to run from the place that God is calling you to be? And you go, well, I don't know if God's calling me to be there. What kind of pursuit have you been making to discover, God, is this what you have for me? Because we do a whole lot trying to do things on our own. And when we do things on our own, that ship of failure goes, no, remember that didn't work last time. That ship of failure goes, you're such a loser. You're never going to be good enough. That ship of failure says, everybody hates you from the last time. Don't you ever try that again. But what if God is saying to you, I'm calling you to take the city. I'm calling you to let me lead you into something that's going to be terrifying. But don't be afraid, because I'm with you. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. So the question is, where are your eyes fixed? Joshua's eyes were fixed on the failure behind him, right? The failure, the ways that he wasn't, there were so many failures. And some of us, we look at our lives and we're like, oh my gosh, there are so many ways that I've screwed up. He was looking at the failure behind him, and it was causing him to live this out and possibly divert him, distract him, cause him to run the other direction from the life that God had ahead of him. Because God was calling him to Jericho. Joshua knew this. Joshua knew God was calling him to the promised land. But he goes, okay, God, I get it, but first, hey, why don't you go check out the city? Okay, God, I believe you, but hey, real quick, bring back a report to make sure that this isn't going to be a disaster. He knew what God was calling him to, and yet the failure inside of him was causing him to go, you know what, I think maybe we need to be ready to run the other direction. What is God calling you to? It might be loving a person that is really unlovable. It might be taking a step of faith into something that you can't control and going, you know what, God, I'm going to trust you with this conversation. God, I'm going to trust you with this decision. God, I'm going to seek you before I seek the advice of all the people around me. I'm going to ask you, what do you have for me? God, rather than doing the things that are a slam dunk for me, the things that I know I'm going to be successful at, the stuff that I know I can do all on my own because I'm cool, because I'm talented, because I'm athletic, because I'm good looking, whatever it is, God, before I just result to that, I'm going to seek you. I'm going to keep my eyes on Jesus. But I think a lot of us also have something that we've experienced, a failure that we've experienced, that is a ship that calls you back and says, hey, you're going to be such a failure. This is never going to work. Remember the last time? Remember when? Remember how awful? So, I want to ask you this, and in a moment we're going to do what we did last week, where we're going to go right on the sails. What is the failure that is calling you back to the ship? What's the failure? Maybe right now you're thinking like it's a no-brainer. You have something in your mind right now. It's like, this failure has made me believe that God's done with me. This failure has made me believe that I'm never going to be good enough. This failure has made me so afraid to try anything else I don't even want. I can't. It controls everything you do. What is the failure that is calling you back to the ship that you need to burn? That you need to go, I'm done. I'm done letting this fear of failure. I'm done letting my past dictate my future. I am ready to burn this ship because I believe there's life ahead. Some of you, you've stopped believing there's life ahead. Some of you, you believe that what has happened to you so far is the definition of you, and now it's just up to you to try and pick up the pieces and do your best. You need to burn the ship of failure so that it doesn't control the life that God has ahead of you. So I want to ask you to bow your head.